I'm Gigi Granger, and I'm the president of Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society. And the purpose of our organization is to provide education and stimulate interest in the culture of orchids. And the purpose of the Million Orchid Project is to reintroduce and populate orchids back into the native habitat here in South Florida. And today's kickoff event heralds the evolution of our commitment to the conservation of orchids in the wild and our commitment to their continuation here in Broward County. So, without further ado, I'm going to allow Rich, our spearhead for the project, to come up and start introducing all these wonderful stars that came to participate today in the Million Orchid Project.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hey, everybody. Let's see if that goes up. Yeah, hi, I'm Rich Ackerman. I'm on the board of the Orchid Society, and I have been sort of helping get this project underway. Thank you all for coming today. It's a great experience, and I hope you all learn a lot. I have some introductions. We have a few people that will be speaking. Commissioner Glassman will be speaking. Jason will be speaking. Vincent, yep, okay. And we've been doing a lot of rehearsals, so it's going to be really smooth and seamless, right? As Gigi said, our society has been around for a long time. We were founded in 1951, and so we've been involved with the city of Fort Lauderdale for many, many years. This is our 62nd show, so 62 times we've done this. And we're really glad to be part of Fort Lauderdale. We've supported a lot of organizations in the past. We've worked with Marie Selby Botanical Garden, with Fairchild, well, not with Fairchild now, but Bonnet House, other groups, Flamingo Gardens, and the American Orchid Society, of course. So education is an important part of what we do as a society. Everyone thinks, well, you're just learning about flowers. But really, our mission statement talks about education, and all of the groups that we've partnered with historically have also been very focused on education. We've done a lot of stuff. I'm going to skip a lot to get on with it. The folks that are willing to talk today are partners for the future and future projects. And I think, Commissioner Glassman, would you like to speak first? Why don't you come on up and take the mic? Thank you.
I'm not as tall as Rich, so I'm going to move the microphone. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rich. Gigi, thank you. There you are. It's great to see all of you here. Thank you for being here. You actually are in District 2 in the city of Fort Lauderdale. Not just that I'm the city commissioner for this district, but it really is the best district in the city. And not that I'm partial or anything, but we do have the most amazing things going on in our district. It's the most diverse culturally, ethnically, event-wise. It always amazes me when I go to events in my district down by Mass District, Fat Village, Flagler District, all the arts, all the culture. Come up here today in Holiday Park, right next to Victoria Park, to be here with all of you to celebrate this amazing work. I did take a peek inside, and oh my gosh, gorgeous, gorgeous. I was luckily I was able to just get a few out the back door, there's so many I don't think you're going to really notice, but if you do, don't worry about it. So officially, on behalf of the city of Fort Lauderdale, I want to welcome everyone here today, especially to the Orchid Society, and for hosting this orchid show today and this weekend all the way through at our fabulous War Memorial Auditorium in the heart of Holiday Park. This is such a historic structure. I want to thank the Director of Parks and Rec who's here, Phil Thornburg, for taking such good care of this facility. This is a very important facility for the history of Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society and Fairchild Tropical Botanical Garden joined efforts through the Million Orchid Project to help restore the endangered native orchid species in Broward County and South Florida. How important that is. The city of Fort Lauderdale is proud to join the initiative and accept the donated 250 native orchids to be installed here at Holiday Park with volunteers from Broward College, Coley Hammock. I see Coley Hammock, and the president of the Neighborhood Association, Jerry Jordan, is here. That's terrific. They're not in District 2, but they are really wonderful people. in just neighboring District 4. They almost came into District 2, I think about 6 years ago. We'll have to work that out. And all the other volunteers are here today. Thank you so much. For those of you that do not know, with the railroads and development boom in the region in the late 1800s, the orchids lost their habitat or were poached and sold without replacement efforts. So the new blooms from the orchids in the coming years will help transform pockets of our community into the natural orchid paradise it once was over a century ago. This project brings together everything great about Fort Lauderdale and what I cherish: nature, history, beauty, and community. Thank you to all the partners of the Million Orchid Project. This is a great way to commence the Orchid Show weekend. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I and the city of Fort Lauderdale really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would also like to recognize our Cooley Hammock people. They chose not to speak, but Jerry and Sue, thank you very much for coming out. The Cooley Hammock Homeowners Association is one of our pilot projects, and we're doing a big installation there on June 1st. So the neighborhood will be beautified, and hopefully we'll be doing it for several years. We can kind of stage it out, roll it out. Our next speaker is Dr. Vincent Carignan. He's supervisor of grounds at Broward College South Campus. He's another one of our partners. We'll be doing installation there on Tax Day, April 15th. And working with his students, he's a very innovative landscape architect and landscape ecologist with a doctorate in environmental sciences. He's been at Broward College for 4 years, and if you ever get a chance to go down there, it is an absolutely gorgeous campus, and I highly recommend a visit. If you give him a call, they'll probably give you the tour, and it's great. So, Vincent, you want to say a few words? Sure. Thank you.
Like Rick said, I've been with Broward College for 3 to 4 years. My goal has always been to diversify the campus and attract students just by making them feel more comfortable on the campus, a safe and clean place. When we met on the environmental committee, he brought the idea of introducing orchids on the campus, and I really latched on to that idea. The college has spent, aside from this project, close to $3,000 on orchids, just for South Campus. Of course, it's mostly exotics, but it's going to attract the people to come see the less showy, perhaps, natives, and they're going to learn about the project that way. And we have different activities throughout the year to get the students to mount orchids and do some, perhaps some, take some measurements to follow the populations. So I'd like to thank the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society because they just gave us 750 orchids that we will be mounting on Earth Week coming up in April. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent. So our last speaker will be the star of the show, Dr. Jason Downing, orchid biologist at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. Dr. Downing grew up around Kansas City, the Kansas City area. Did his graduate work at Florida International University, getting a master's degree in environmental studies and a PhD in biology in 2016. He's been at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden for 7 years, where he heads up the Million Orchid Project. He's a creative, innovative, brilliant scientist, in my humble opinion. And so, Jason, here you go. It's all you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's too kind. First, I'd like to start by, again, thanking the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society, in particular, Rich. He really has spearheaded this, and we get lots of requests to participate in the program, I'm happy to say, but we were really keen on getting Broward involved in the project in a big way. And with that said, also, we need to thank the commissioner as well as the city of Fort Lauderdale for also supporting the program. It's key with this type of project that the entire community participates, and that's really the vision of the project in its essence. So a little bit about the project. As the name implies, the Million Orchid Project, it's quite an audacious attempt to repopulate over 1 million orchids, hopefully, back into the urban landscapes of South Florida. So it's exceptional in a couple ways. The first is it's a different twist on traditional conservation. typically where I'd work and did a lot of my research for my PhD, where people aren't. We're deep in the natural areas. We're in the Everglades. We're in Fakahatchee. We're in China in the mountains, in Brazil in the rainforests. But this is focused directly on the urban landscapes, the places where people live, learn, work, play. And we involve the students, community, and the public directly in every aspect of the restoration process. So the plants we're actually planting today were helped propagated by local students in Miami-Dade County and soon Broward. So the work they do is directly contributing to not only the beautification, but the actual conservation actions of the project. So the project itself, actually, the vision and kind of the idea for the project started on the other side of the world in Singapore. And in Singapore, if you don't know, it's one of the most densely populated cities in the world. It's in tropics, and they have very few green spaces. But the green spaces they do have, they've maximized the potential there. And we took a visit, the director and myself on another occasion, to check out their orchid propagation laboratories at the National Orchid Garden in Singapore. And it's an amazing garden that's focused on orchids, and they have thousands of flowering orchids at all times. But we went to check out the laboratories in a precursor for us building our new science village and our laboratories at Fairchild. We wanted to include a micropropagation laboratory. And when we got there, of course, we had you see all the flasks and containers. If you're familiar with orchids, you can see some today. And when you grow orchids, there's an excess. Essentially, they produce thousands, if not millions, of tiny seeds, and when you propagate them in the lab, we can germinate nearly 100%. So you really end up with a surplus of these plants. And what they did is they handed them off to their public work officials. And their park managers, they said, hey, go throw them in the city parks and on the streets, and let's see how they do. And to their surprise, they did well. And in some cases, some of these urban sites were even better than the natural areas. So we thought, hey, why not South Florida, right? We have our own burgeoning urban metropolis, subtropical, and our own host of native orchids, which have a rich history culturally and historically in the area. As the commissioner said, these orchids were once thought of as disposable houseplants. When Flagler built that railroad, records show that they may have been the very first resource to come out of South Florida, even before the cypress timber. So, with that said, there's a direct need to establish these plants again. There are literally very, very few populations remaining in our urban landscapes. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to change that as of today. When we leave here today, there will be hundreds of more orchids than there were when we started this project. And that's really, really a big deal in terms of the conservation. Thank you. So for the project, we've targeted 8 species that we've started with, but we could grow into more as the project grows and develops. We started with 6 of tree orchid species. So these are orchids that were historically growing in the branches of every live oak, every mahogany, the cypress throughout South Florida. We will introduce these species before we plant them. But we also included 2 ground orchid species. A lot of people don't know there's ground orchids in quite a few species. These ground orchids fill the gaps in the landscapes. So as you can imagine, much of southern Florida is not beautiful canopies of Old Cutler Road where Fairchild is, or places like Holiday Park where you have lots of these canopy trees. So we need to have species that could perform well in places where they have no trees, and that's where the ground orchids fit in. So we've learned a lot through the project. We're now in our 4th year. We had a really ridiculous goal of 5 years, but we've pushed that on. We've had things that are beyond our control, like Irma, which set us back absolutely in 2017. That was a kind of a massive impact to the program. But we rebounded quite nicely this year. To date, we've produced well over 200,000 plants in our labs with the helps of students and volunteers, and we've installed over 140,000 in the landscapes of Miami-Dade and beyond. So, yeah, that's a really major achievement for us. Thank you. We're far away from that million, but we will keep chugging along as long as we continue to develop partnerships with folks like the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society, and we will keep pushing until we reach our goal of 1 million orchids back into the landscapes. Thank you. So with that said, we should get some plants in your guys' hands and let's put some up. Let's get to the fun part.